What's up, Nerdy Bunch audience, Nerdie Sports audience? Welcome back to another podcast. Today, we're going to be strictly talking about the NBA. It's a lot that happened this week. It is Wednesday, May 14th. 2 days before today was the NBA draft. We're going to, talk about the lottery and how the Mavs somehow got the number one overall pick and getting Cooper Flagg later.
Give me a nice foil hat. I'm joking.
Uh,
Just some people do. I don't think so.
You're
We'll see
somewhat
what
that
happens.
guy for sure. All right. Well, hey, he already introduced himself, my man Scotty. As always, a man who did not believe in the Cavaliers like I did. How you doing, Scotty?
That's probably my best call to playoffs because I've had some bad picks, but I'm feeling good that one. So I was going to start with the West, but since you said it, let's talk about the Pacers Cavs real quick because it's going to be a little shorter one, and I want to save more time for long conversations. And I think a couple things. The final game, first of all, disappointing the Cavs. I don't want to use the word choke because it was the first half. A choke to me, it has to start in the second half, just general. You're up 19 with 8 minutes and 10 seconds to go. I wrote that down and you get outscored the rest of the game by 28 points for the final 32 minutes. So almost a point a minute for the rest of the game. And if a point a minute doesn't sound large for a second, just remember that would be a 48-point loss in the full game. Sometimes because like in the fourth quarter, you say, oh, well, you could come back from 12 because of threes. But when you realize over the course of a game, that's a lot of points. Like it's honestly kind of a choke, a little embarrassing. And I think that everybody missed the canary in the coal mine, so to say, because Miami, your team, graciously gave us such an excellent first round performance that we kind of missed it. I was looking back today in the Cavs' final 16 games of the regular season, they went 8-8. So you look at that, that means they were 56-10 at that point, and they go 8-8 in the end of the season. And in the regular season, I want to stick with that for a second before we look at the playoffs. They were 1-3 against Indiana. So you take those two stats by themselves and you say to yourself, that there were signs that people weren't seeing. I understand why, because they had a gaudy regular season record and whatnot. And nobody watched the Pacers, including myself. I watched honestly no regular season Pacers game. The playoffs, they've been arguably the most exciting team to watch in the playoffs. Regular season, didn't watch Indiana at all. There was, this was a cracked hole on the ship. There were signs, it was fractured, and credit to Indiana. They came in, they took care of business. Game 5, they could have easily, they were down 19 at that point. They could have just said, okay, it's in Cleveland. We'll win this back at our home. 19's a lot. It's not what it used to be. It was the threes, but instead they put out a monster run. And then at halftime, you're Cleveland. You're still up 4. I understand you're coming off a run. Like you come out and what they get outscored in the third quarter by, I don't remember, 13.
Third quarter, yeah,
So
33-20.
yeah, and that's basically the game. They lose by 9. They were down 9 at fourth quarter, even 29-29. It's like, where's your heart? You're still you're 3-1, and you could. They gave the speech of saying, "Oh, we did this before. You had LeBron, but we come back from 3-1," and like that was just really really disappointing. And big props to the Pacers and Halliburton who can really rub in that whole overrated player thing in everybody's face.
Yeah, he balled out plus 27
Whew,
by himself. Unbelievable. So fun stat. The Cavaliers finished the regular season playoffs 36-10 at home. The Pacers handed the Cavs 5 of those 10 losses.
wow, I did not know that.
Pacers were 5-0
That is a
versus
fun
Cleveland
stat.
this season at home or on the road, technically at Rocket Arena. So Donovan Mitchell injured. He fought his heart out. He tried so hard to win. He finished with 35 points, 9 rebounds, 4 steals, great game, but he missed 16 free throws, 15 for 21 from free throw, which going back to the Knicks Celtics series, we were mentioning that monstrous 45 missed threes in game 1 with the Celtics. And the Knicks were like, well, we also missed 14 free throws, 14 as a team. The fact that this guy got to the line that many times, missed 16, that shows signs of exhaustion. I'll bring in Nikola Jokic a little bit later, but he's a guy who's shooting 70% from free throw, typical 90% free throw shooter. This guy's really struggling because he's tired. Nikola Jokic is way too tired. Donovan Mitchell literally is like by far their best player right now. And this is a team that was built around unity, not that they had this big star. They were similar to the Pacers that, yeah, they have Tyrese Halliburton, but he's not a LeBron James. He's not a Jason Tatum. He's not one of those monstrous guys like Steph Curry that's just going to will your way like Jokic or Anthony Edwards could be. They're a well-balanced team. but I was like so confident in the Cavs because you go down the line, I'm like, the Pacers are basically baby Cavs. But for some reason, this is a team, there's only been 15 teams in the NBA history, by the way, who have won 63 or more regular season games, beating those teams by 9.5 points or more. 13 of them have made the finals. One was the 2015 Spurs
Hmm.
that didn't make it, and then one was this Cavaliers team. So this is one of the best regular season teams we've ever seen in the history of this game. And then, we're getting towards this phase where a lot of people are talking more and more every day. Is 82 games too much? Steph Curry's out, Jason Tatum's out. There's constantly injuries while we have the science, the nutrition, the diet around like making us the best athletes we possibly could be. But here we are getting injured more than ever. And it's like hamstring injuries, it's tweaking injuries, it's a lot of Achilles injuries. I'm a little surprised by what the Caps have done. A team that beat the Heat by 122 combined points in that series, swept them. Yeah, the Heat aren't elite, but they got enough players. I was like, yo, the Cavs are really proving that they have the capability of winning the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, we're looking at the Celtics probably going to lose to the Knicks, possibly in five if they lose tonight. And then we're looking at the Timberwolves, probably going to win in five. But those three teams, the Thunder, the Celtics, and the Cavs, were like the locks for the conference finals
Yes.
based on Vegas odds. Now we're looking at only one of those teams may make it. And even them, they're only up 3-2. Like, what's happening?
I was thinking of bringing this later, but I'm going to jump to this. The NBA is becoming a league of parity. It was known from the 80s so on, because we had the 60s, which the Celtics dominate. In the 60s, we'll kind of throw it out. It starts off as the 8 teams, so it's not so dominant, but still, like 9 championships in the 60s for Celtics. Then you have the 70s. It's kind of the lost decade. It's the only decade in NBA history does not one back-to-back champion. There's only the Celtics are the only team. The Celtics and the Knicks are the only team to win more than one ring, and they're not back to back. So that's like, and it's gotten here. There's a lot of outliers. Maybe the ABA is there, so the talent's more spread. Obviously, when talent comes together, you have more dynasties, so that affects it too. A lot of weird things. Forgotten. I mean, the NBA is still on tape delay at that point. It's not a big league, so to say. Then Bird Magic comes, boom, NBA starts taking off. But it takes off in a way of dynasties. You go through my entire life up until recently was dynasties. I was born in '86. So for reference, I was born Lakers winning back-to-back champions, and Pat Riley coining the phrase, "We're going for a three-peat." They didn't get it. So I was born with a back-to-back, followed by Detroit for a back-to-back, followed by the Bulls for three in a row, then the Rockets back-to-back, then the Bulls three in a row. At this point, by the time 1999 comes, I'm 13 and I've never seen a standalone champion in my life. Seen, not that I was one watching, at 0 years old, but during my lifetime, there's never been a not back-to-back champion. You have the Spurs, but in fairness, it is an outlier year because it is a lockout year. So we kind of throw that one away, and fair to the Spurs or not, it is what it is. And then you have the Lakers, another three-peat. At this point, just categorizing through my life, I am now, jeez, I lost my age here. I'm 17 years old. I've seen, sorry, 16, and I've seen three-peats. Over half of my existence have been not back-to-back champions,
Yeah,
three-peats.
yeah,
So, for me particularly, and people of my age, millennials, a lot of people within my age say that are really the best sports consumers, the largest audience are millennials. So somewhere around my age, plus or minus, say 5 years. We're used to just minimum back-to-back and three-peat being not that uncommon. Once every 5 or 6 years, we got a three-peat and a back-to-back is basically a given. If you win a championship, it's almost a guarantee in the NBA at that point that you're going to win a second one. And now we're going on what will be, because I think we're all safely to say the Celtics are not going to win a championship, even if they get past the Knicks somehow. Without Tatum, it's not going to happen a championship. So I'm just talking championship. Forget this series. That's going to end tonight, maybe. I think this will be 8 straight different champions. And the Warriors would have had 2 rings in that period, but separated by a nice margin. I think there's a 4-year gap between their 2 rings. So really no dynasty, so to say, at all. And maybe if the Nuggets can make a comeback, they could be close. So they have a 2-year gap between their rings. But yeah, no dynasty to so to speak of at all. And the NBA is becoming a year of parity. Even the style, Warriors coming. All right, we got Steph Curry. We're saying, okay, three-pointers are going to take over the league, take over the league, take over the league. And then for all that we've said that, and even we talk about the Celtics, and they were super high on 3-pointers. But before the Celtics, we had the Nuggets. They don't shoot a lot of threes. We had the Bucks, big man team. We even had the Lakers. They're not super big, but Anthony Davis was their second best player, I would argue. LeBron's their first place, like more of a big man style, like not necessarily. So I want to lead off with this question for you, Tim. Is the hyper 3-point shooting algorithm, is that, I don't know if I'd say dead, but maybe taking a step back? Because if you don't have Steph Curry on your team, all the Celtics showed is you can win one ring doing it that way.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think we sway way too far in one direction often, especially with this 3-point momentum. It was the thing I was concerned about the Celtics the entire year. I remember texting you like first month of the season, here's the Celtics 3-point, takes, and no team has ever been close. Like it's astronomically higher than any team's ever done it. And then, of course, they second round series opens up 45 missed threes. We'll say it time and
Mm-hmm.
time again. I probably will remember this for the next 5, 10 years. That one game, just how much of an outlier that was, and how there's not enough adjusting with that. It's like we're trusting the math too much. And we come with this with every sport, specifically with the NFL, where I feel like, we're always trying to figure out, should they go for it on fourth down? Should they not? Should they go for it on 2-point conversion? What should we do there? And, these guys are looking at the mathematical charts, figuring out the percentages. I'm like, yeah, but if you're up against Bobby Wagner, that should be a difference than if you're just up against a random, linebacker. Like we need to figure out the feel. If my team's looking sluggish, like Donovan Mitchell last night, like, you know, he's the only one doing anything. But even with that, like it's almost like he wasn't trusting the rest of his team too. Like the best thing this Pacers team did was make the Cavs act out of alignment with how they normally act. This is a
Mm-hmm.
team who is constantly moving the ball. They learned from the Celtics. They're like, all right, pace and space is the way we're going to win it. Maybe not as many threes, but the Cavs were even great against the Celtics. I remember going to Boston this year, watching Cavs in Boston completely dominate them with the Celtics starting the game off red hot. And the Celtics have done this time and time again. That's why I had much more faith in the Cavs, even though actually because they were nowhere, because the Celtics won it. To your point, these teams aren't hungry enough to like go back to back. Speaking of the 2015 Spurs, it's been that time since we really had those dynasties. Right before 2015, the Miami Heat dominated.
Yeah.
Spurs were dominating. Right after that, it was Cavs and Warriors. This, basically, I felt like until LeBron James retired, we're just going to see dynasties. But now he's 22 years into his career. They get Luka Doncic, amazing trade, obviously, but still not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of what you're talking about, the Timberwolves, massive presence, big size, strong men, like forcing their way, willing to the basket, getting better chances. We didn't even have a 3-point line back in the day. And then they're like, all right, these shots are more difficult. They should be worth more. Plus, it's creating a lot more space in between. But now we're moving so quickly that maybe you need to, make sure you get these layups. Like if the Thunder also, yeah, they got a great 3-point shot at the end of the game by Shea, but like the Hartenstein at the end of the game had two clutch layups.
Mm-hmm.
They have Hartenstein as well as Chet Holmgren,
Yeah, they
two
have
monster
size.
big presences. And that's why, once again, you got the Pacers with, Miles Turner, even though he shoots threes, but, you also have Pascal Siakam, two monster big guys. The Cavs, even though they didn't do well in the series, Mobley and Allen, still two big presences. The Celtics are playing small ball. The Knicks are relying on Mitchell Robinson right now, and Karl Anthony Towns may not be shooting threes like he did versus the Pistons, but he's dominating the boards, getting 14 rebounds a game. Karl Anthony Towns is averaging, I think, 20 and 12 in the playoffs. Yeah, 20 and 12 in the playoffs. And even, last thing I'll say, like Alperen Şengün, one of my favorite risers, if the playoffs, I want to go through the risers, like the two guys who were eliminated that I feel like the monster risers, it's Alperen Şengün and Amen Thompson. These are guys that are getting offensive rebounds and steals. And Amen Thompson may not be like massive in size, but he plays with force. And he's able to jump so high, so he's able to get these rebounds. Şengün averaged 21 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 offensive rebounds, 2 steals. Amen Thompson averaged 16.7 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 offensive rebounds, 2 steals. Now, 3 offensive rebounds, 2 steals may not seem like amazing, but Miles Turner right now leading the league in terms of the playoffs with 2.5 steals a game. Right now, the leader, I believe, is like 3.8 offensive rebounds per game. I'm not sure exactly who it is, but like those are monster numbers coming out
Yeah.
two guys, and then they say like Jalen Green's like carrying this team, but I don't have faith enough with him because he's just a sharpshooter. Okay, like there's so many of those guys, and shooting's one of those things that you can improve on, compared to like you can't really build guys who can hustle and steal and like that. That's not something you're going to all of a sudden get so much better at.
And you
So
can't
to
grow.
answer your point quickly, yeah, you can't grow. You could get thicker like Giannis. Speaking of a guy who may be going to somewhere else.
Yes.
But to answer your point, I think we need to calm down on threes. We need to calm down on analytics and understand there is feel to this game. And if I see my opponent weak at one point, I want to attack that, whether that's what I do or not. But at the same time, I want to trust myself and understand my flow. So when I have a Cavs team, there's so many players. Like Ty Jerome is probably one of the biggest stock downs, unfortunately, of all the players in the playoffs right now.
Hmm.
You know, he's just missing so many shots. And like, I want to have faith. Like, there's a guy like Luka Dort. He doesn't matter if he goes 0 for 8. He wants to shoot, and you want those guys. But I don't want my eighth man to like think he's a lights out shooter, especially if he's missing everything.
Yeah. Like small criticism for Anthony Edwards taking a straight bullet. I think he shoots a little too many threes now. And I give massive credit because when he came in the league, he really couldn't shoot. And now he's over 40%. And that's great because you can improve shooting, like you mentioned. But you don't want to fall so in love with shooting that it becomes this infatuation and everything else put aside. You bring up the NFL, and I feel like, the similarity here is that it feels like the big man is the return of the big man, so to say. And in the NFL, it was like you thought the running back was kind of dead, and then the running back's like, wait a minute, you need us. And you look, and maybe the message is if you don't have Steph Curry, then you need a big man. Because you take out Steph Curry's championships, all of them, even his more recent one without Durant, and you can throw in Durant. I know he's tall, but he's kind of a shooter. And you start looking at recent champions. The Celtics, they do it on the analytics. So maybe they're the outlier, not the trend going forward, right? They go before that. You got Jokic, you got Giannis, like I said, you got Anthony Davis and LeBron. LeBron's built like a brick shit house. Then you have the weird year obviously for Toronto, which is just a very outlier year. But at the minimum, if you didn't have a dominant center, you at least had big people take up some space, including you mentioned the Thunder. Hartenstein was a sneaky great transaction this offseason. One of the better pickups. That's not flashy, but he's meant a lot to the Thunder. And they do have Chat. I know he's skinny, but they have some size and they just have so much depth. Like you can't just build all shooters. The people like his position is basketball, and we all bring shooters. You mentioned the Knicks. The Knicks are doing the double center. They're putting Mitchell Robinson there, and when he's in with Towns, they're dominating the glass against Boston. And this had nothing to do with the series as far as because they were going to win that game, I believe, without Tatum getting injured or not. They were going to be up 3 games to 1. We'll get into injury in a second. But, they were using size there. And you're seeing the big man being back a little bit, kind of pushing back against to hold on with those threes a little second. Hold on with those threes. You got to respect us, even though the Cavs just point out Nas. You mentioned Minnesota. And, and they got height, obviously, with Rudy, Nas Reed. Like, big men are coming in and making a difference here, saying, it's not just forget us. I'm not saying threes aren't important, but if you don't have Steph Curry, then size does at least matter. Not your best player, maybe. It could be like Hartenstein that you got to have some size in there. They got Chet, are debatable second or third best. They got Hartenstein. So probably their third and fourth best players are tall guys. Maybe their first two might be SGA and Williams. But yeah, seeing some size come back here is what I'm saying.
Jalen Williams, another stock down player. It's back to back playoffs where I'm just like so disappointed in this guy. You know, I don't know. Speaking of like it's the big man back, it's the running back back. Like the Philadelphia Eagles won the championship with getting the best acquisition of the year, getting
Yes.
Saquon Barkley from your New York Giants. Same with
Thanks.
Hartenstein. Same with Hartenstein, man. That
From
was
the
my
Knicks.
favorite acquisition of another New York, robbery right there, getting like a crucial guy who, the Knicks could be using, but at the same time, they got Mitchell Robinson, they got Karl Anthony Towns, so they're like okay when it comes to that. But Hartenstein was like their heart, same with like DiVincenzo, These were gritty guys. I'm really impressed by the Knicks when it comes to those stock up guys.
Hmm.
Another Julius Randle, ex Nick, stock way up for me. Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Bridges, even Brunson, of course. Like his stock was already so high, but this guy's balling out. Like, he was 12th in MVP 2 years ago, fifth in MVP this past year, not this past year, but last year. Who knows where he's going to finish this year? I don't think he's going to be fifth. He's probably going to be in that 5 to 12 gap. But still, like maybe next year he becomes a top three MVP guy. This is a guy who's one of the league leaders in assists, one of the league leaders in points, but most importantly, clutch points, fourth quarter points.
Yes.
When it comes to threes, it's the type of thing if you need it, it's good to have it. But I don't want my players constantly relying on it because when you get tired, I know for me as a basketball player, like even though I'm big compared to like people in the park, when I'm tired, it's so much easier just to be like, all right, I'm gonna shoot, rather than
Yep.
go at the hoop, like and especially going past like all these big bodies, like hacking at you, like pulling you, like it's exhausting. Like seeing Donovan Mitchell. Like there's a reason he had 21 free throw attempts, and he's missing them because he's tired. He's a lights out shooter.
Hmm.
He like closes his eyes, he meditates, he has worked on his free throw game, but these guys are exhausted. They need more help. So I want a team. It used to be you just need like seven guys, and those seven guys I can trust. And hey, maybe the Knicks can prove me that wrong that you can actually win a championship in 2025 with just six dudes. But I want
Maybe.
depth. I want, the Thunder are beating this team in clutch moments because they got multiple guys they could go to. They have
Hmm.
Shea, of course, guy averaged, I think, like 33 points a game this year. He was shooting like 52% from the field. That's efficiency. But at the same time, they have one of the best defenses. The Knicks are working with that. They didn't have a great defense,
Hmm.
but Bridges and OG both averaging two steals per game in the playoffs, like top of the charts. Pacers, as I mentioned before, Miles Turner, one of their big guys, averaging 2.5 steals per game. Nikola Jokic, the league leader in steals this year, all of a sudden is dominating every category, even though he's exhausted, shooting bad from free throws. This guy's first in the playoffs in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. 318 points, 155 rebounds, 97 assists, 26 steals. And he's sixth in blocks with 11. Like this guy's absolutely dominating, but he needs more help.
Hmm.
Aaron Gordon is one of the biggest risers of this entire playoffs, but they're not deep enough. It's just they're not there. Now, I thought at the end of the day, the last two games going to that series, I think we'll just flop around all over the place. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Game four, game five, the Thunder dominated in clutch time. They totally outplayed them in the last 2, 3 minutes of the game. And this is a team with the Thunder who, Nikola Jokic, close to Brunson, one of the clutchest players in the game. Aaron Gordon hitting, so many game winners, two monstrous game winners with the tip in and the three. It's I always thought like I would trust the Nuggets in the playoffs because of their late game. You don't want this game to be close, but there's a reason, as you mentioned pre-podcast conversation, the Thunder minus 1800 to win this series because they won game four and five in clutch time, and they're likely going to be able to win again, and they're minus 4.5 in game six.
Yeah. The odds are interesting to me because, like I said, you just mentioned it. They're minus 1800 to win the series, which is crazy high by for people in comparison. I mentioned this pre-show. The Knicks, who are 3 games to one, and Tatum is gone, are only minus 620. So basically, a third is likely to beat this Celtics team without Tatum up 3 games to one than Oklahoma is to beat the Nuggets up 3 games to two. Honestly, I don't think I quite agree with that. I think that's a little off, but that's what the odds saying. Vegas, those casinos aren't built on hopes and dreams; they're built on money we lost. So, Vegas is saying that it's gonna happen. Yeah, I was impressed with the Thunder, particularly last night. I want to talk on Game Five more than Game Four. I know Thunder won two in a row, but you look at the Thunder, and you wonder, they're the youngest team in the NBA. The biggest criticism everybody always says them, oh, they're great, but they're young. They're great, but they're young. They're great, but they're young. They haven't done this before. Look at what happened last year. Then they lost in the second round. And you're the Nuggets. You're up nine entering a quarter, I believe it was. and then you were up 9 with around, I think it was like 8 minutes left ish. Nine's not that much in today's NBA, but still, young team. You could even flashback to just a week ago, basically game one, and say, can they not close? We all know what happened in game one there. But Jokic hits that turnaround three with a minute and a half. The crowd is like, what the hell? Twitter's going wild, posting memes and stuff. People are like, oh my God, oh Jokic, he's amazing, and Jokic has been phenomenal. And the Thunder come down, and they hit not back-to-back threes, but they hit two threes before the Nuggets get another basket. They go back up six with 30 seconds left, and that's kind of it. And they really showed some great poise there. I loved what I saw there. I was like, okay. I was like, that showed me something. That showed me that kind of almost answered that question. Not that the series is over, but answers the question of the can they get past that youth? I was like, that was kind of an answer to can I trust them? Because and they now that's back-to-back games you mentioned because they were losing in game four too when they came back. So okay, back-to-back games they come in and they finish. There's no Colombo. Like game two, I don't care. They win by 50. That's what they do best, win by 50. But can they win close? We mentioned at the start of the series they had 5 games in the regular season that were 5-point games. The Thunder. So they didn't have a lot of experience of that. They're like, okay, this was a what was this? It ended to have a 7-point win technically, and game four with a 5-point win. Like, all right, you're showing me something. I like what I'm seeing. And you mentioned depth. SGA has not played a great playoffs. His numbers are down, but they're so deep that they can survive it. You look at SGA, and I'm not digging him. I know you're talking about rise and falls, but he's objectively his playoff numbers are down. His field goal percentage is down 7%. His points per game are down 4, almost 5, 4.7. He's objectively not played a great playoffs, but they're so deep they can handle it. Against the Grizzlies, he's played honestly bad. He had 3 bad games, and they were still able to sweep him. And against Denver, he's had, I'd say, 2 below average games, 2 good games, and last night was his best game, the mixed bag, and they're surviving it because they're just so deep. And the Nuggets, you look at the minutes they're playing. I think it was with game four that they played like 42 minutes every player. And, game three, like they're playing an obscene amount of minutes. And the Nuggets, I think if it was just a starting five, it's 2K, you turn off fatigue, the Nuggets are a better team. But they got no depth. They got to play all the players. And OKC is like, oh, you're struggling today? That's okay. Boom. Alex Caruso coming off the bench at a big game. Oh, Aaron Williams off the bench, 10 points on like three shooting. Players just coming in, locking stuff down. And that depth is helping them a lot. So I do like the Thunder in the end, but I'm thinking Thunder 7. I think the Nuggets pull off the win, get it to 7.
Yeah, I mean, this series is amazing. The Nuggets have been back to back best first round series versus the Clippers, best second round series. Every other series pretty much over. I know you mentioned, the Knicks are like minus 620, I believe you said. It was funny because the Celtics started that series minus 800. So it's almost like Vegas, like, I've realized this, like, with the numbers, like, they almost can't, like, get the number too high because they have to protect what they originally thought. There must be some, like, baked in cash with that. But so this has been a rock fight. I know you're saying like, yeah, Shea's not doing as well, and that is true. But like at the end of the day, like most players don't perform as well when it comes to the playoffs. Their numbers do drop. And when we circle back to game four, OKC was up 17-8 after the first quarter. Like this is a gritty, gritty, gritty series. They ended up winning 92-87. Just like you mentioned, they won by 7 and 5 in these last 2 games. And it really proved a lot to me in these last 2 games. Yeah, the Nuggets don't have the depth, but they do have the best player in the game. They do have a guy who I've been promoting for MVP consistently. I just rattled off in a series where it hasn't been a high scoring series. Plus this guy went up against Zubac and Kawhi in the first rounds. Nikola Jokic is still dominating every category, by margins. There's a gap between rebounds, which rebounds are my port, as I mentioned last week, as you're talking with the big men, getting more possessions matters tremendously, especially when we're missing so many shots. Those possessions matter tremendously. He has 155 rebounds, Jokic. Second is Karl Anthony Towns with 116. That's a gap of 39. It's a big, big percentage gap. So rebounds matter a lot. And I really hope we could find a game where we can get the big men involved a lot more. We move, especially with like the Golden State Warriors with Draymond Green, guys like 6'6", 6'7", playing center. Now we're like, we need twin towers. We need Tim Duncan and Duncan Oh my
David
God.
Robinson.
David Robinson. I don't know why I kept wanting to say Duncan Robinson, like my Miami Heat. David Robinson and Tim Duncan, or like Hakeem. We want big men that are going to dominate the game. Jokic dominates this game for a reason, like being a man of his size. If you look at the draft, a lot of the top guys are smaller guys. There's a lot of good guards coming out. But I think Con Knipple, the guy's 6'7". He's one of my big sleepers. Now he is rising. He's like fifth in the depth chart right now of like the best players. But first game I was watching him in Duke, I was like, yeah, Cooper Flagg's great, but this guy's going to be a great, great professional in the game. I think we could save more like in-depth draft talk once we get closer to the draft. But like,
Yeah.
speaking of odds, how insane was that draft lottery? I want to bring you one stat and then you can rattle off. There was a 1 in 8,319 chance that the draft lottery was going to end up with the Mavericks first, the Spurs second, and the Sixers third. That's 0.012. The odds are so insane. Like, Zach Lowe was talking about, obviously the draft lottery, pulling the balls, and basically like a bunch of teams had like one ball they were going to get the first pick. The Spurs had three. Yeah, they got the second pick, good for them. But like the odds of the Mavs getting this, especially a team that like just was in the finals last year, all of a sudden now they trade the best player in the world, and like the karma gods are like so against us. Plus, like Joel Embiid, the way he played this year, like the 76ers don't deserve this. The
Yeah.
Spurs have gotten, Tim Duncan, speaking of, they got the number one pick before. They just got Victor Wembanyama. Like, they don't need more luck.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the Jazz who have never got it
Never
before.
gotten it.
Never got it before. I feel bad, man. I'm
Yeah.
like the Hornets, I don't know if they deserve it, but like tanking should not matter. Yet these teams still are taking your Nets.
Mm.
What are they, seventh? Like, good for them. Like eighth. Oh my God, even worse. Like they could
So,
have been worse. They could have tried harder to get worse. And
you
the
know,
fact that they got the eighth overall pick, wild.
I mean, I don't know what the answer to the NBA lottery is. I do think we could keep trying to fine tune it because the big thing is this, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And I heard this on thought about it is not just this year, last year. Last year, number one pick went to the Hawks. That's back-to-back years where the number one pick went to a team that was in the play-in. So you're in the playoffs or you're not, because you shouldn't be eligible to get the number one pick if you're in the playoffs. So is the play-in part of the playoffs? And it gets confusing. I guess you're saying that it's not because you didn't make the full playoffs, but so I feel like that's confusing because you look at Dallas. I'm not picking on Dallas, and actually, I'm happy for them because for the fans, I'm happy because the fans just had their heart
Yes.
ripped out with Luka. So in that sense, I'm happy for them that they're not going to necessarily go into a decade of misery. They should have a pretty solid team, and I think there's good potential there. Whether they keep Cooper Flag or trade him, that they could have a solid team. Still, I wonder what it would have been like to have him and Luka, but who knows? But but yeah, like I don't know. The draft, something needs to be changed. We mentioned a playoff format. I mentioned like first round, get a bye and seven seeds because this isn't working. You can't have teams that are in the playoffs getting the number one pick. The Mavs won, I think it was 39. The Mavs won, I read the stat, they had won more games last year than the Wizards had won in the previous like 3 years combined. So it's like the there's something a little off here. I don't, and by the way, I don't believe in it. I was joking in the beginning. I don't think there's any draft conspiracy or anything like that. Blah blah blah. And there's a million reasons to prove that wrong. But I don't know. Like, you know, I guess I don't have pity for the Wizards either or the Hornets 'cause I feel like they're teams that aren't trying. And so part of me is like, well, if you're going to tank intentionally, then you don't deserve it. And the Spurs, I don't know how the Spurs are like the luckiest team. They don't tank that often, but every time they do, it works out perfectly. It's like we tank one time, we get Tim Duncan. Next time we tank, we get a Wembanyama. Wow, you just keep getting hit with the lucky thing. It was like the Magic in the early '90s. You getting Shaq and Penny Hardaway, but
And this
it's
was a
weird.
draft with three dominant players. For them to get Dylan Harper, or for some reason if they want
Mhm.
Ace Bailey, that's such a gold mine. They already have, in Castle the rookie of the
Yeah,
year.
and you never know because like I said, this is a draft that had high end, and that's not every year. Last year they get the Rookie of the Year. That was a number four pick. So you mentioned top three. They ended up getting the Rookie of the Year at number four. And last year, you're the Hawks. You're like, oh, we got the number one pick, but there's no giant star staring. You're like, oh, we're gonna get this year. I remember the year my Nets got the number one pick. We got Kenyon Martin, and I was like, man. I was like, why couldn't we got the number one pick on one of these years where there's, a LeBron? Like, why do we have the number one pick? No offense, Kenyon Martin, great net. But like, there's no, locked, surefire, awesome guy. And the NBA is weird like that because there's, we'll go. It's normally like 2, 3, sometimes as much as 5 years where there's not a star, and then there's like a short out lock star.
Super
That's
duper
that's
star.
NBA.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
here,
happens a
here,
lot.
that every 5 years, it's like
Yeah,
way up here, you'll get a
yeah,
player. And so there's a combination of randomness with the lottery and when you get the lottery. So even trading future first round picks is this crapshoot of I wonder if this 2029 pick could be an amazing pick and the 2028 pick could actually not be that good, even if they're both number one picks. Very weird.
yeah.
But
Last year's draft was not great, but getting Wembanyama the year before, Paul Bencaro the year before that, Kate Cunningham the year before that, then
and
Anthony Edwards, Zion, DeAndre Ayton, for the
I just
most
want to.
part, these guys are locks, to be
Mhm.
dominant, but, we thought Zion was going to be a dominant lock for sure. But I guess fatigue and injury.
I do want to say though,
Wait,
the Spurs are on the clock. They might have not gotten the number one pick, but they got to be good next year. You cannot
yeah,
go from Wembanyama, Castle, and then you get the number two pick, or they might trade it. Your rumors are something like, okay, I need to see something because they're not even making the plan. And I understand when he got injured, but keep in mind when he got injured, they were the 11th seed when he got injured, so they were not in the plan when he got injured. So it's like I gotta see something. You're getting too much talent. I need to see something because we have a short attention spans as people. You mentioned Zion. If we don't have some type of playoff. They don't even have to win a game. If they just get in and you see some Wembanyama playoff highlights, if we don't, people are going to forget about him and we'll move on to the next player. Maybe that's Cooper Flagg, but we'll just move on and be like, all
totally.
right, let's look at somebody else because now I'm bored of you. You didn't entertain me. Like, you got to give me something. So Spurs, they are on the clock. I need to see some next year. I got to see some excitement plays. I got to see them make the playoffs. Like, make it at least, 8 seed in. I don't want to hear playing. All right, and I got to see something for that, or else I'm gonna change the channel to somebody else. Maybe that new team is the Mavs. Watching Cooper Flagg, maybe it's wherever Giannis goes, but I'm not gonna be watching Spurs if I don't see something this year.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Zion Williamson's not even somebody we really care about as much anymore, And it was almost laughable that he was at the NBA draft lottery representing the Pelicans. Like, all right, I guess this is where this organization's at right now. But I think the best thing you were talking about was the play-in tournament. It's like, do we want to win this? The fact that the Miami Heat won, then got dominated in the first round by the Cavs, they're all of a sudden way worse off than
Mhm.
if they lost and potentially, rose in the draft and got, a Nipple. That would have been incredible for them.
Mhm.
Perfect fit for the Heat, by the way, I think. And they could still move up in the draft and all that, but like, what's the advantage of winning? I think you should create more of an advantage for winning these games. Yeah, your owners are going to get some more cash, I guess, from a couple of home games in the playoffs. That matters. But the fact that the Mavs like made the play-in tournament, sucked in the play-in tournament, and then still had like somewhat of a chance. I think they were like 12th in the odds. I don't know if I want 20% to my first, to the worst team in the league, but like there should be something. I don't really know. I mean, not a great conversation, I guess, because I don't know the solution. I don't have any thoughts around that, but I think it's terrible the fact that you lose the playing tournament. Your team's good enough to make that top 10, but then all of a sudden you get the number one overall pick, generational superstar potentially in Cooper Flagg. But good for them because here's a guy who's an amazing defender. When they
Mhm.
talk about, going defense first, like this is a perfect fit for the Mavs. Hopefully Kyrie is healthy enough for them to actually be a great team
Mhm.
next year. But they got a lot there. They got a lot of size and they could definitely compete next year. They may not have Luca, but they could definitely compete.
Tim, I have the solution. I've decided. I know. I'm blowing
Okay.
your mind right here. For all of you watching, please watch Adam Silver. I have the solution. Playoffs go down to 7 teams on each conference. We went over that before. People don't know. We dropped to 7. First team gets a bye. That leaves 16 teams not to make the playoffs. We break them up into 4 groups of 4, all right, based on records. So the bottom 4 records, the middle 4, so on and so on. So 1 through 4, 5 through 8, the 9 through 12, and 13 through 16. Okay. Then you do a mini tournament with those teams against only, but in your brackets. So one team's only playing 1 through 4 and so on. So the bottom 4 teams are guaranteed a pick in the 1 through 4 region. And the best of the eliminated are guaranteed a pick in, say, 13 through 16. And the point why I think this works is this. If your record is so bad that you're going to be in the bottom 4 team, then you're not going to be playing like you can't tank a great team, and Dallas could never tank far enough down to get to that bottom 4 to guarantee one of the top 4 picks. Do you get what I'm saying? So you'd have to be really bad to be in one of the top 4, which yeah, you could still tank to say I guarantee a shot at the top 4. But if you're the worst of the top 4, then you're probably going to lose to the other team. If you get what I'm saying. So, for example, if you take the NBA standings, let's just say, because it would be really hard for teams to thread the needle, right? So let's take the NBA standings. Just give me a second to bring this up because this genius mind just came to me right now. You take the NBA standings and you say, okay, the bottom 4 teams this year, we got Utah, Washington, Cleveland, Pelicans. Well, sorry, not Cleveland, Charlotte, Washington, Utah, Pelicans. You're like, we have to be bad enough that we fall in that group. But if we're so bad, say the worst team is, I don't know, Washington, then I'm not going to be able to beat maybe the Pelicans. So I'm going to have zero chance at the number 1 pick. I'm guaranteed to be the 4th pick now. So if I want the number 1 pick, I have to find a way to have the 4th worst record almost, because I figure I want to be the best of the bottom 4. Threading that needle is going to be impossible for any team to truly tank, because you can't have a team like, say, Dallas tank that far down, because it'd be too good they wouldn't win that tournament. And in this scenario, they want to make the playoffs. You know, and so how do you find in? You say maybe you'd have teams 5 through 8 trying to just drop in there, but be good enough to still be a good team. So I feel like you could separate them in tiers. And this way you're saying, okay, you have to be bad enough to get in this tier, but then you have to be good enough to win your tournament of tiers.
Yeah, I
You
think
have to
like
try.
bottom 8 would be good, like an
Maybe
eight
that's not
team
a bad, because
tournament.
then, yeah, bottom 8
Yeah,
means you have to be pretty bad. The bottom 8 team, the best of the bottom 8, 1, 2, 3, is Toronto. So it's like Toronto's not a bad team. Sorry, I miscounted that. The bottom 8 it would be Spurs. Now you're like, all right, we have to be bad enough to fall here, but then good enough to win the tournament. Because would the Spurs win a tournament this year? Maybe without Wemby. I don't know. There's Toronto's in there, Philly's in there, Brooklyn. Who knows who wins that tournament? Maybe one of those teams. But separate them in tiers and also guaranteeing that, and they do try to do this with the lottery, but basically guaranteeing that if you're, say, the 14th best team, the best pick you could have is the number 9 pick. You can't get the number 1 pick, and vice versa. If you're the worst team, in that case, you say 2 tiers, then the worst team is guaranteed a top 8 pick.
but the Blazers get the 9th pick automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of that tier. Like this year we had 9 teams that are pretty much like locked in for that. And the Spurs weren't there until
No.
Wembanyama
If
got
they didn't have
injured.
Wemby, they wouldn't have even been there.
Yeah,
So if it
yeah.
wasn't the Spurs, it would have been Portland. Would have been the other on the bottom 8. Now your bottom 8 are Portland, Toronto, Brooklyn, Philly, New Orleans, Charlotte, Washington, Utah, and you're like, okay, now the winner of this tournament gets the number 1 overall pick, and now we're just doing, and the second whoever gets finals gets the second overall pick. So now you want to be the best. So you got to be bad enough to fall in that bracket, but then you want to be the best of those brackets. So you have to have some talent. You can't just bring in G League players because then you lose that tournament and you'll get the 8th pick. And you're like, damn it, well, what was the point of that? Right, so that means you have to have talent because with 8 teams, you got to have some talent. There could be upsets. You have to have talent with 8 teams, but you can't be too talented or you get to that top 8 through 16.
I love this, man. I love the idea of having a tournament of the worst teams for some incentive. And based on that tournament, results, we can determine
Sure.
those top 8 picks. And at the end of the day, the NBA really is it's heavy
Hmm.
favored with those top 8 picks. Those top 8 picks matter a lot more than the rest of the draft. Sometimes you're going to get guys like Devin Booker falling, you
Hmm.
know, um, but at the end of the day, it's those elite guys that are typically in the top of the draft. Like it's a lot easier to understand who's going to be great. When it comes to football, it's a lot harder to determine how these players are going to excel at that next level. And you're going to have players that for some reason don't work out like DeAndre and or Zion Williamson, but pretty much this number 1 overall pick matters so much. We should have a lot more fun around it.
Yes.
The lottery is cool, but we're not really seeing the cool part of it. With the ping pong balls, apparently like they're in the back room. There's a guy who has like his back to them and he like raises his hand every 10 seconds for them to grab another ball. and based on the numbers, it's just so complicated. Like, make
Hmm.
it simple. We know win, lose, you get this. The play-in tournament, too many teams, too many trash games right at the end of the season. I don't need Miami Heat versus Hawks for, that first break into the playoffs feel. No, I want it to be, and this playoff has been incredible so far. And I think we're set up for some pretty good conference finals. We're
Hmm.
to fast forward ahead, I'm pretty sure we're locked in, even though the Celtics, funny enough, so speaking of Celtics, ESPN projects the Knicks to have a 59% chance of winning tonight, but the Celtics are minus 4.5. This happens a lot, a lot. And
Definitely.
honestly, I kind of agree with ESPN. I don't know why the Celtics are favored. Same with the Cavs game last night. I was like, I hope they could do it, but the Cavs are like minus 8.5. I'm like, Indiana, yeah, I even last podcast, literally a week ago, I was like, I had like hope, but even in
Mhm.
the tone of my voice, I was like, it's more just hope based on what I've seen previously, hoping they could turn it around. And at the end of the day, like they've proven themselves. Like the Pacers have truly proven themselves, especially versus this team. I'm excited for another Pacers Knicks banger. And then on the other end, we're gonna get Thunder versus Timberwolves, probably,
Most
especially
likely.
without Steph Curry. This team, Timberwolves are minus 10.5. Like that game's almost unwatchable, other than the fact that we could watch Anthony Edwards and he's one of the best players to watch. But like, 9:30 tip off, I'm probably not gonna finish it. It's probably not gonna be worth watching in the fourth quarter, you know? So we're pretty much going to get, unless the Nuggets can surprise us, and that's definitely possible. But according to those minus 1800 odds, Vegas doesn't think it's possible at all. So we're going to get Timberwolves versus Thunder. And that's why, at the end of the day, the Thunder are minus 140 to win the championship. Even last week, when not last week, a couple of games ago, I'll pull it up. A couple of games ago, when they were 2-2 versus the Nuggets, um, Nick pulled it up for me. Thunder's still favored to win the title. Yeah. So they were at minus 620 to win the series. Now all of a sudden, minus 620 leaped to minus 1800 just for one win. But, the Nuggets plus 420, I feel like a lot of people probably took that bet just because the odds, it being a 2-2
Yeah.
series. And, the Knicks at that point, so Knicks were 12 to 1 to win the East. Oh, last thing I'll say. So, beginning of the year, I felt really heavy that the Celtics were going to do pretty good. The Cavs were a bit of a surprise. They had a dominant season. The Thunder, they dominated last year. They even won 11 more games this year. They were a team we wouldn't be surprised to be at this point. But right before the playoffs, the Pacers were 28-1 to win the East. And now look at them. All they got to do is beat the Knicks, and then they're
Mhm.
locked in with that. What a bet that could have been. And the Timberwolves were 20-1 to win the West. They got to beat the Thunder a little harder for sure. And the Knicks were 12-1. So if we pick these, last week was like the podcast about the underdogs, and I feel like this podcast is like proving that big men are back. The big men are
Yes.
back. The running backs are back. The power's back. We're going into the 2025, 2026 season next year. And I'm excited to see what these teams can do.
Yeah. I'm excited. I bet my best value bet is obviously Denver to win a championship, plus 2,900 for those interested in betting. And if you think if they win against the Thunder somehow, then they're favored to win the championship, actually. So you're kind of what you're really saying is it plus 2,900 that they could come back in the series. That's good value. Minnesota 2-1 beat the Thunder 2-1 in the regular season this year. So you could have an interesting series there. See how that plays out.
They could definitely compete. The Thunder
So
have shown some, tinks in their armor.
if anybody had, I'll just throw out, for example, Minnesota Pacers as an NBA Finals matchup, I would like you to raise your hand and show me who had that because, like, that's on the board, very much alive. And I
Yeah.
have no idea how to look it up, but I imagine if you pick the exacto and you could do that, that must have paid back, like 10,000 to 1 if you would picked that matchup for the NBA Finals, which is
And for
is
all the
crazy.
people that think the NBA is rigged, the
Yeah,
fact that ESPN wants a Minnesota versus Indiana finals,
they do
get
not.
out of
They
here.
do not. And
They do
even
not.
the Thunder were the best team in the NBA. That's a small market team too. So I sure you, India right now, if there's any right now, they're praying to everybody holy from every 350 Buddhist gods and everything in between to please God let the Knicks make the finals because they need big market in there. That's what ESPN is hoping for.
Absolutely.
But
Especially like Timberwolves versus Knicks. Here's
yeah,
Karl Anthony Towns going back to
ooh, I like
Minnesota.
that.
Here's Durant going back to New York. DiVincenzo going back to New
Yep,
York.
yep,
That was the biggest splash of the NBA offseason.
yeah. That's that'd be fun. And just having the Knicks by themselves, they will carry playoff ratings through the roof
Yeah, totally.
right there. So I did, it's fun. It's fun because you feel like it really feels like anybody could win. The Thunder are favored to win it all, but it definitely feels like anybody could win. Maybe we'll look back and the Thunder win it all and be like, how did we not see that coming? They won, 68 games. Why? But the Thunder each round has kind of been a little bit. I mean, not the first round, a little bit of kind of show me you're too young. I need to see, and maybe they just actually do it. We'll be rooting for the Knicks. I'm speaking for you because come on, from the New York here, we gotta rooting for the Knicks to win it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not rooting for the Pacers. I'm
Now,
definitely not rooting for OKC or Minnesota. I love the Knicks. Knicks are one of my favorite teams. If the Miami Heat are done, I'm rooting for the Knicks all day.
speaking of jumping around here. Let's talk about the future of the Boston. Tatum
Okay.
is done for it's an Achilles.
Achilles.
That sucks. I mean, at that between the two, you're rooting even for an ACL. Like Achilles is the worst. We
I was
saw
shocked by that. The way he fell and was
non-contact
like
injury.
grimacing so hard. Like usually like Kobe Bryant has a classic Achilles injury where he's still walking off. Like Tatum couldn't even walk. A lot of
Yeah,
times they like look back, they're like, what happened there? I feel like somebody just like kicked me in the back of the leg.
and you
But
know,
he was like grimacing.
there was part of me that for a second was even like if he's fully injured because of the famous like Paul Pierce getting a wheelchair coming back. But and
Oh,
I swear
back.
that's not I'm not throwing any shade when I say that. I'm just saying that you don't know in the NBA. You don't know till you know. Um,
I think Paul
and
Pierce was injured, by the way.
now now we got the results of Achilles. I mean, that's about the worst NBA injury you could have. That's like a 12 to 15 month timetable. And because we're already in the playoffs, that is all of next year, 100% of next year, because even at a 12-month, which is like a quick recovery for Achilles, and he's younger than some other players that have had this. Well, that would be second round of next year's playoffs, which is no guarantee they would get to without him. I think they could in the East, but that's not a guarantee. So, and it'd be coming off rusty. So next year you could forget about for the Celtics. Al Horford is going to retire, if not this year, most likely, then definitely by the end of next year. So hence he would have never played another game with Tatum. Porzingis, 1 year left on his contract. He probably goes. And you're looking at a Celtics team that is not going to be the same. I trust management, Brad Stevens, that they'll be competitive. But, the Celtics, it's funny. It's like, and I feel like we felt this way with the Nuggets last year. We felt this way with the Bucks a couple years ago, where you're saying, oh, this is looking like a dynasty. I started this podcast talking about dynasties. And now you're like, yeah, no, they're done and like done for a couple years. I think Brad Stevens could rebuild them eventually, but like, I don't see how they could compete for a championship for the next 2 years. Next year, of course, gone. The year after that, probably rebuilding. And the year after that, Tatum is probably going to be rusty because this is such a bad injury that like when players come back and you look at Durant, and he was gone for almost 2 years because he was injured to finals. So what happened is he didn't come back till way late the next year. And so similar in that, like the next year, you're still kind of rusty. You're feeling almost timid. It takes you a while to get used to putting pressure on that. That the Celtics could be I don't want to say bad. They're a good team, but they're not going to be nothing for a couple years. And what does this mean for the East? I mean, the East is wide open. Let's say if, to jump to next year in a way. I know we're talking about the Series Finals. Like, what does this mean? Are the Knicks favored to win the entire East? Maybe the Pistons making a move. It's interesting to see how this works for the entire Eastern Conference for me and the Celtics as their future.
Yeah, I mean, having Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum as your, core, it sounds incredible. But when you're coming off of an Achilles injury, I think, the way Tatum plays so passively, speaking of the shooting, like he's always backing up shooting, I think he could get back to normal. Kevin Durant has proven that we could do that for sure, especially they have very similar games in regards to that. But Jalen Brown's 28. You want to take advantage of that timeline, but the rest of their team's pretty old. Kristaps, not sure. I hope it's like an illness. If he could come back next year, he's an incredible player. He's 29. If you have Jalen Brown and Kristaps and Derek White's still great, even though he's 30 years old. Drew Holiday's 34. He's getting old quick. Al Horford's probably done after this year. He's 38 years old. Peyton Pritchard, six man of the year. He's super young, not super young. He's 27. I still think they got enough to compete to do well, especially in an East that's not really proven to have a dominant team, even though maybe the Pacers are that team,
Yeah.
back-to-back conference champions, maybe they don't make the finals too often, but I feel like there's going to be some heavy hitters like at the top consistently with that. But now with the Spurs and the Mavs getting the top two picks, the West gets even
Deeper.
better. And this is like it's crazy. It's crazy, man. So, the Celtics I think are still going to be amazing. I still think they're going to be one of the best teams in the East. Even without Tatum, Jalen Brown's enough. He's a superstar. He's that kind of guy. He was Finals MVP for a reason. But yeah, this team, it's almost like this is a sorry champion. Even the way, look, obviously, like, so nobody wants a guy to get injured, but the Knicks were going to win that game. They were up 10 when he got injured. The game was pretty much over,
Yeah.
and Tatum was balling out. But Tatum's top 10 player, so they're not going to be the same quality team, obviously losing a top 10 player, but they could, get back in it. I just think it's funny that this team was bought for $6.1 billion. Now all of a sudden, look at them. That value is tremendously different. But who's the top team in the East? Are you going to pick the Cavs after what you saw versus the
No.
Pacers? Do you really have full faith that the Pacers are that team? Are the Knicks, the way they're constructed, the elite team? I don't think we really have an elite team in the East.
Yeah, the East feels like there is no elite team. It felt super top heavy. We spoke on the first game of the playoffs when we did a podcast and we're doing like our predictions, and everybody obviously went alone saying, "Oh, it's Cavs, Celtics, Cavs, Celtics, Cavs, Celtics." Well, now due to injury and the Cavs just performance, they both take a step back, and you're like, "There's nobody at the head." The West gets deeper with the number one and number two overall pick, and you kind of say to yourself like, "Who are these teams?" Because you feel like the top three or four teams in the West would be the favorite if they were in the East. If you put the Nuggets in the East, they're favored as the number one team. So it's really wide open, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I think I have to say the New York Knicks have to be the favorite, just because
Brunson,
you
right?
beat the champs and
Hmm.
you have Brunson, and I got to mention his clutchness here for a second. He wins Clutch Player of the Year, and if you look at some of the best players in the NBA or best players of the teams remaining, well, SGA is down almost 5 points a game, 4.7 points from his season average. Jokic is down 3 points from his season average. Anthony Edwards is right on it, bang on his season average. I was actually surprised. I'll skip over the Warriors because they're going to be gone. I'll skip over the Cavs because they're going to be gone because they are gone.
Well, rest in peace, Warriors. We didn't
Sorry,
even mention them at all in
I
this
know
podcast, but it's
that's
okay.
because the games are hard to watch. Not only have
They
they
are.
lost the last couple, but they're just ugly. The Pacers, Halliburton is right on his season average. Then you go to Brunson. He's 4 points higher his season average. He's averaging 30 points a game compared to 26. So if you look at the stars that are remaining, everybody's either at or below where they are, and then Jalen Brunson is not just at up 4 points. So that just shows you how good he's been in the clutch. You add that, which has to count. It's like, it's almost an intangible, but when you're building like your potential championship at an Eastern Conference championship, let's just say, then that gives him the tiebreaker over teams like say Indiana. Or does Milwaukee even have Giannis? What if they get rid of him? They even take a bigger step back. Boston, no Tatum. So I think the Knicks, and I swear I'm not saying this as a homer, because I openly will admit, I raised a hand. I said they have no chance of winning the NBA Finals when we did all the teams relied, including Miami, and they, said no chance. The Knicks are going to have to be the favorite next year. I'm picking them. I'm picking them tonight to close out. I think we should quickly just go through the next couple games. I'm picking the Knicks tonight to close out. I think the Knicks will be favored against the Pacers, though I feel a little worried about that. The Pacers are so underrated, and they should be favored overall next year to come out of the East. Yeah, I like the Knicks. Just go through the games real quick. I got Knicks tonight winning. Warriors tonight. The series closes out. I got
Warriors
Nuggets
tonight.
pushing 7. I think Nuggets win on Thursday. We're gonna get a great Saint game 7. That'll be on Sunday, and we're gonna have no basketball on Friday or Saturday, unfortunately, which would be a perfect time to start our playoff elimination tournament. Yeah, the basketball starts to dry up. We could have this tournament of ours going and keeping us entertained.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wonder when that tournament would be. Would it be
Hey,
during the playoffs too?
I would say yes. Think about this. There's
Yeah,
generally on average a 5-day gap between the end of the conference finals and the start of the NBA finals. Normally it's about
exactly. Yeah,
average of 5.
perfect time
That
for
you
that.
could start it right there, and you can run through the NBA finals in the background because in the NBA Finals, on average, there's 3 days break between games. So
Yeah,
there's a
it's just
lot of
one
gap in
game.
the NBA. It's like, oh, they'll play June 3rd, and then again June 6th, and maybe like then June, and then there's always then when they switch the first time they switch, it's like a 4 day gap. It goes from like June 6th to like the 10th. There's a lot of gap of no basketball there. And all you could play the tournament. It could be start during that 5 day gap, finish up during like game 2, game 3 of the NBA Finals. So you have a little more consistent basketball. You still have enough time before the draft, which is like the 28th or something. You could push it down another week if you want to, make it a fourth, close to the 4th of July. And there's still plenty of time to get all done. And we could keep basketball because the worst part about the finals, and I'm a huge NBA fan. The only person I know bigger than me is you. Is it feels like it peters out because the games end up being gapped, where it's like hopefully you get great games, but the NBA Finals kind of peters out, almost like in college basketball upside down pyramid, where you go from having multiple great games a night to one game and I have to wait 3 days for another one. So it kind of peters out like that. So I think having something to keep you entertained in between would be great.
Yeah, I think having that at the end of May is perfect. You want these teams to at least know what they're going to do, before
Yeah,
the draft. If anything, maybe push the draft, but you got to have it before the
sure.
finals. The finals has to be your like last hurrah. So we're literally exactly 6 weeks away from the NBA draft. It's on June
Yes.
25th. And for all my tennis fans, we're not going to be talking tennis day, but my favorite tournament starts in 3 days. Roland
I'm
Garros, the
excited.
French Open. So I'm stoked for that. All right. Anything else, Scotty, before we wrap it up? We're an hour in.
Well, I honestly all I can say is let's go Knicks. I'm excited to see if the Knicks can make the finals. Sorry, a little homework talk for the podcast, but this is big because there's a lot of our young fans, that are Gen Z that have never seen a good Knicks team. They have not been good this century, basically. So,
Yeah. If
that'd be great.
anybody's
Hopefully,
under
I'm hoping.
30 years old, they
Yeah, you
haven't.
have seen it. You see the camera go around, you recognize Ben Stiller, but you're like, who are these other people? They're showing Larry Johnson, Patrick Ewing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know who these people. So,
Timothy Chalamet and Kylie Jenner.
yeah, they're like, oh, I'm like, that's Patrick Ewing, that's Larry Johnson. Like, who?
All
I'm like,
right.
yeah, all right. So yeah, let's go next. Super excited. Next week, hopefully we can talk conference finals. NFL schedule gets out. I'm getting that bad boy, and excited for that. Excited for the finals. I'm ready.
Let's go next, baby. Let's go. All right, Nerdy Bunch audience. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for following. And as always, Scotty,
Keep it nerdy.
peace.